So this is the withdrawal upgrade for the Stakehouse walkthrough. We're gonna kick it off and explaining stuff related to withdrawals from LSC, Stakehouse DApp, Stakehouse protocol, and how is this going to be natively done, and adapters, bunch of stuff. So interesting. Vincent, do you want to take it off and start over? What is the withdrawal? What is a Shapella? What is this? What it means? How much you can take off? You know, is that 32 ETH immediately or waiting period? I don't know. All kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let me share my screen. Go through sort of yeah. So we've got a few things that we wanted to go through. I like this post from a testant in terms of if you want to have a deep technical dive of what's going on under the hood post Shanghai on Ethereum, this is a really good post. So as we know, Ethereum upgraded in Ethereum mainnet upgraded in March 2023 to Shanghai, and Shanghai brought a number of new opcodes, one of which being it wasn't actually an opcode. It brought about a system level operation that directly affects both the consensus layer and the execution layer. So if you so this is a really good post, but execution layer wise, the changes are more minimal than what's happening on the consensus layer. So the consensus layer defines the specification for processing withdrawals. So you have this additional functionality for processing a withdrawal in every slot. So every slot now has additional data processing. And what the consensus layer is doing is it's generating payments to the execution layer. So it does this according to certain criteria. When it's finished generating, it can generate 16 withdrawals per slot. So that's defined here in maximum number of operations per block. You can do a maximum number of BLS to execution layer changes, and a max number of withdrawals per execution layer. Yeah, so that's the maximum number of withdrawals allowed in every execution layer block. But remember, obviously, you don't always have an execution layer. The execution layer is not extending at the same rate as the consensus layer. So if there's a missed slot in the consensus layer, you have to wait for the next slot for a validator to be online and propose a block to actually get a withdrawal. So you can roughly estimate when a validator will get some funds paid to it on the execution layer, but it's because of things like missed slots that mean that it's not fully deterministic. But yes, so there's actually sort of a lot of information to digest there. If I sort of take a rewind, I do, yeah, like I said, I like this post because it goes into what is a withdrawal, yeah. So consensus layer is generating these withdrawals from a BLS key. So a BLS key is associated with a validator running on the consensus layer. And when that validator is actually performing various duties, which can be as basic as attestations, block proposals, whistle blowing, it can do any of that, and it will receive a reward from the consensus layer for doing those jobs through newly minted coins. So newly minted Ethereum originates from the consensus layer according to the various rules in force there, and it gets applied to a BLS public key. Now, every BLS public key is associated with a validator index. If you're familiar with this block explorer for consensus layer, you'll see that any BLS public key, which is a really long string compared to a vanilla execution layer address, has an associated validator index. And so validators, you can see it in the beacon chain spec, but not this one, because every spec just appends the previous one. So you'd have to go to the phase 0 spec to look at the validator structure. But basically, the consensus layer maintains an append-only list of validators, and every time the list is appended and a validator is added to the consensus layer, the BLS key associated with that validator will get assigned a unique validator index, which will never change throughout the lifetime of the validator, even once the validator exits. It is forever part of the history of the consensus layer, and part of the Stakehouse protocol as well. So when a withdrawal is generated, it is a payment, like I said, from the consensus layer to the execution layer from the BLS key balance, according to some rules, right? So you have the origin of the funds is from a specific validator index. It goes to a specific address. And there is an amount. Withdrawal index is a globally unique index for every single payment from consensus layer to the execution layer. So what you can think of it as, you can think of it like a payment receipt, which is guaranteed to be unique by the consensus layer, provided nothing has gone wrong at that level, in all the clients. All the clients are expected to know and agree what the latest global index is when they're generating new withdrawals. And like I said, there can be 16 withdrawals per execution layer block or execution layer payload inside of a consensus layer slot. So what triggers a withdrawal? Okay, so there are two triggers. Okay, so there are two high-level triggers, right? So either I'll get into this in a second. So to start with, in order for the consensus layer to generate withdrawals to the execution layer, you have to have what's called type 1 withdrawal credentials. So type 1 withdrawal credentials, if you go to the deposits, you can see the withdrawal credentials here. This is a 0x01 withdrawal credentials. Some validators that were, it's mainly validators that were created close to the genesis of mainnet and also the genesis of the testnets like Prater and Gorelli that have sort of older credentials, older versions. So this is 0x01, but the original withdrawal credentials were 0x00, and they were, it's a hash of BLS withdrawal credentials associated with the validator. So those BLS credentials, those 0x00 credentials, are not eligible for payments from the consensus layer to the execution layer, because the execution layer can only receive ETH to an ECDSA address. So if it's a 0x01 address, it's a type 1 withdrawal credentials. Type 1 withdrawal credentials are ECDSA Ethereum execution layer addresses. So they are eligible for receiving payments. So if you have created a validator that with a BLS credentials, consensus layer will not look into your validator for generating any of these withdrawals and any payments to the address. So you would need to convert your credentials to type 1 withdrawal credentials in order to do that. Assuming you have type 1 withdrawal credentials, all Stakehouse protocol validators have type 1 withdrawal credentials. The withdrawal credentials are delegated to your derivative tokens, your slots, and your DEs. So that the consensus layer does two things. When it basically crawls through the validator list, the entire list of the append only list of validators that are on the consensus layer. It crawls through that entire list and checks for any validator that requires a withdrawal generating for it. So that means the validator is going to either be active or potentially inactive, right? So if the validator is in an active state, it's actively performing attestations, block proposal, it's not performed any consensus layer violations, it is not voluntarily exited the chain or anything like that, then these validators, so the consensus layer doesn't actually care about any balance above the 32 ETH induction balance. It is based on the consensus layer just says that every validator has two balances. You have your effective balance and you have your active balance. Your effective balance is used for the calculation of all of your rewards and things like that. So your earnings on the consensus layer are not compounding; they're not based on your active balance. But this is your effective balance is known as your stake weight, and comes from your original induction balance, the amount of ETH that was sent to the deposit contract to register the validator. Consensus layer wants 32 ETH to register a validator, because you can send less, but it will not, until it gets the first 32 ETH to the deposit contract, it won't actually go through the process of validation and activation of that validator. So the consensus layer says now post Shanghai that the validator will temporarily accrue earnings to its BLS key balance on the active balance, but that is an ephemeral state, and from time to time, the balance will be reset to 32, with anything above 32 swept back to the type 1 withdrawal credentials. So you have this. I mean, Attestin used this an analogy of a withdrawal clock, but yeah, it goes through all of the validator lists, sweeping, and continually paying the execution layer for the work that the validator has done. It doesn't want for every validator, it doesn't want any more than 32 ETH in the BLS key balance. So that's when it's in the active state. However, when the validator decides to voluntarily exit, or if the validator is forcibly ejected from the beacon chain by the consensus layer, i.e. committed an offense, it's committed a violation, it's done a double signing, and those sorts of things can happen by accident, people migrating from one machine to another. You know, if you do that, if you're not careful and you run the signing key in two places, without any doppelganger protection, you will end up double signing an attestation or something else, and which is a direct violation of the consensus rules of consensus layer, so it will eject you. But that aside, in terms of the life cycle of a validator, it goes through a few life cycles from a consensus layer perspective. It goes once the 32 ETH has arrived and the deposit contract been processed by the consensus layer, it will go into an activation queue. You will get assigned an activation, an epoch from which you were eligible for activation. You then get assigned an activation epoch until you exit. You then, so once you trigger the exit, whether either yourself or consensus layer, you get assigned an exit epoch. And finally, the final stage is withdrawal. So you will be assigned a withdrawal epoch after your exit, where you will receive the balance, the full balance of the BLS key will be withdrawn to the withdrawal credentials. But I mean, that's, if it's a type 1, you need to convert it anyway, even if you've been forcibly exit. So that's a real brief summary of what is happening at the consensus layer. When the consensus layer is generating the withdrawals, it goes to the execution layer, and it will generate the 16 withdrawals per execution layer block. And the execution layer will just give that balance unconditionally to the account. So there's no code executed. There's no it is a system level operation, which means it will not be supplied any gas for the transfer of the tokens. into the target wallet. So there is a lot of detail on this post. It's a really good post, and it talks about time between withdrawals based on how many eligible validators there are for withdrawals. So just because a validator is in the full validator list doesn't mean it's eligible for withdrawals. This goes into online offline process. I don't think we need to, for the purposes of this discussion, obviously you can read further stuff, but we don't need to delve deeper into that. The consensus layer spec is also a nice reference point for, like I said, actually what is happening when withdrawals are being processed. So I guess we can then map that to what is happening in the Stakehouse protocol. So assuming you have a validator registered with the Stakehouse protocol, as I said, you already have a type 1 withdrawal credentials. So periodically, the consensus layer will be paying ETH to the execution layer. That can be that you can do a few things with. So if you want to keep the validator active, you can mint liquid derivative ETH. So you think of this like a wrapped Ether. You can mint these tokens, use them in DeFi, transfer them. They are yield bearing and accrue more and more DETH. Or you can actually you can take the DETH and you can perform a skimming operation. So just like the consensus layer is skimming the ETH above the 32 ETH to the execution layer, so you can do that as well with a DETH. So you can perform partial withdrawals, and you can partially withdraw some of the DETH in supply or liquid ETH inside of the protocol. Liquid free 1-for-1. The DETH you'll be able to withdraw ETH from those liquid tokens. That's the reason why we use the wrapped Ether analogy, because it is at the smart contract level, giving you the ability to draw down ETH from your DETH position. That is a really interesting sort of primitive because it allows for it allows you to not worry about what is happening at the DETH token level, because you can swap your DETH. Well, it's not swap, it's a redemption. You can redeem the DETH for an underlying partial withdrawal inside of the protocol. And it's only on the basis of withdrawals that have taken place. So you can see that this validator is through the consensus layer has been generating withdrawals. You have 0.5 ETH, and you have all this Ether being paid, and you can say, well, at some point, 0.3 DETH has been paid. ETH has been paid from the consensus layer to the execution layer, and I want to burn 0.3 DETH, and I want to get ETH back, because maybe you want to use it elsewhere in DeFi, or you want to set up more validators. So you can do compound staking with ETH that is actually protected inside of the protocol, and not any kind of sort of synthetic representation. It's actually ETH that is there, readily available, ready for redemption, and can be, so the positions, the compound staking positions, can be unwound anytime and fully settled for ETH that is in the protocol. The whole point with the DETH and the slot token inside of the Stakehouse protocol is they're operating like debt positions. So very much similar to the sort of the CATPs that people are familiar with, but sort of not as structured in a different way to that. So it's not a direct analogy, but the idea being is that, like, you can mint as more and more ETH is coming into the execution layer, the Stakehouse protocol, you can mint debt positions against that. So 1-for-1. So you can mint 1 DETH for every 1 ETH that arrives in the consensus layer in inflation rewards, and then at any time you can redeem that position, burning the DETH and claiming the underlying ETH. So So that yield can be used to repay loans. It can be collateral. It can be, I mean, the composition possibilities here are really big. So you just have to understand sort of the flow of how that's taking place. But the underlying induction balance has to stay so the way that if you go to the Stakehouse protocol docs, you can see Stakehouse protocol. We have documentation on how the token model works. And it talks about how we have, so for the 32 ETH going into the deposit contract, 24 of that is minted as a DETH token and 8 as a slot token. So the underlying, these are the induction token balances that are minted, and then more and more DETH can be minted from the inflation rewards only of the consensus layer. And like I say, you can perform partial withdrawals against that. But in terms of the induction 24 DETH balance, if you want to unstake the full amount, you need to burn the full 24 DETH. Either via some kind of coordination contract. Maybe you don't have the 24 DETH in your hands, but you can coordinate it via a contract, and people can deposit tokens, and an LP token can be given back to all of the depositors, right? So we can perform full redemption via smart contract assistance, right? So we can have people that want to exit their DETH position for ETH. For an ETH token, 1 for 1, they just have to bring the DETH, they'll get an LP token back, in the rage quit process. And then, when you're unstaking the ETH, you just then burn your LP tokens for the original ETH position. And you can do that trustlessly at a smart contract level without any intermediaries, no commission. I mean, Stakehouse protocol at the base layer does not have the ability, has no rent seeking ability. Stakehouse protocol is just inventory management of assets that are sitting on the consensus layer, but debt positions are being minted on the execution layer. And there is no rent-seeking capability built in at the Stakehouse protocol level, so there's no commission. There's no intermediary. There is just your assets, the consensus layer, which is an external entity. And the ability to enter and leave and redeem the underlying ETH of the specific validator that you are dealing with. Everything is synced around a BLS public key. So once you understand how to work with that and build upon that, we have a whole academy with that. We're going to start expanding more and more, and we're going to add more templates. We have if you go to the academy, we're going to be expanding these, but we have, for example, this is for the liquid staking derivative application that is built on top of Stakehouse protocol. So this is an application for farming Stakehouse assets. It's a way of managing LP positions on top of the Stakehouse protocol. So the Stakehouse protocol has the inventory, and LSD does the management of that and pooling and all those sorts of things. It gives out LP tokens to people. And this is a way of querying and managing assets from that. But we will be adding more and more templates in there. So it is definitely worth a look. But one thing, so if we go back here, minting derivatives, this overview. So a user's wallet brings in ETH via the Stakehouse protocol into the Ethereum deposit contract. That mints tokens. Now, going back to that debt analogy, if you want to redeem the underlying stake, you need to burn your tokens. So the DETH and the SOT token that you receive, you need to burn them in order to redeem the underlying staked ETH. So if we reference this blog, when a validator has type 1 withdrawal credentials, it's in the withdrawable state. Let's say the voluntary exit has been performed on the consensus layer. BLS key says, I no longer want to be a validator. I just want my ETH back. consensus layer says, yeah, no problem. I'll send it back to the registered withdrawal credentials. So in this case, that has been delegated to the DETH and the slot tokens, right? Now, so the Stakehouse protocol says, okay, cool. We're going to receive, so it's going to receive the ETH, right? And in order to claim that, you need to burn your debt position, right? So you need to burn the DETH and you need to burn the slot token. And that process is known as the rage quit process. So the rage quit process is the process of burning the derivatives in order to redeem the underlying asset, right? So this is different to a partial withdrawal, because a partial withdrawal would only burn the inflation, the ETH that has been accrued from a validator being active consensus layer, just constantly paying the execution layer for all the work that the validator is doing. And you can partially withdraw the DETH against that to get the ETH out of the contract. So rage quit is about burning all the derivatives that are associated with a BLS public key in order to claim the full amounts, the full withdrawal from the protocol. So we have like a little visual hook here for how that might work. So as you may have guessed, that the first step in all of this is to get the full balance out of the consensus layer, a validator needs to trigger the voluntary exit. The voluntary exit is a well-documented feature of the consensus layer, and it's been there since the phase 0, the genesis of the beacon chain. Voluntary exits have been possible since then, I believe. And what we have done is we have made that available with the Stakehouse SDK. So the Stakehouse SDK, which you can install it from NPM. So that now has the ability to perform a voluntary exit. So it's basically a helper function that if you are, if you're not, so if you want to use this helper function, you present locally on your own local machine your key store, your password. It will help you unlock it, broadcast the voluntary withdrawal message, and the validator will exit. So this is a simple way of doing it. Obviously, there are many other tools available to voluntarily exit a validator. You don't have to use the Stakehouse SDK, but we try to reduce all of the steps necessary to get the rage quit going as smoothly as possible. We do that. We help out through the SDK. So it's just an additional tool into what is already out there, but in a simplified package. That's the idea, reducing the number of steps to go from 0 to 1. So that's your voluntary exit. You tell consensus you don't want to do anything. Now, if you're an LSD validator, you have to do some additional steps because with LSD application built on top of Stakehouse, there is pooling mechanisms, LP tokens. There's basically a lot more LP tokens to pay back. So you just have to coordinate via a contract the distribution of the unstaked ETH. Not a problem for a smart contract to do that. So you have a rage quit assistant that helps. But if you're a solo staker with a Stakehouse protocol, you can just proceed through with triggering the rage quit. So you present all the tokens in your wallet. It says, okay, cool, we can burn that debt position. And then you can jump to executing a full withdrawal. So that is basically there to say, hey, Stakehouse protocol, I've done my rage quit, I've burnt my tokens. Can you please check and can I execute a withdrawal of the unstaked ETH that came from the consensus layer to the execution layer? I was a validator, I owned 32.3 ETH, so I'd like to walk away with that. So it does the processing, and there is this check. If it's an LSD validator, it will pay out the assistant, which will distribute to the LPs, but otherwise it will just pay out the solo staker directly. We have maybe, I don't know, if you guys on the call have any questions up to this point. I know that Benor has some further additional things that we can demonstrate. We can show some voluntary exits and stuff like that, but maybe we can open up the floor to any initial thoughts here. What have I missed? What do people want to know?
I have a couple of things, right? So I want to keep this thing here what is the rage quit assistant? Why we call as a rage quit? Because it's not a name that is familiar to withdrawal, right? Is that withdrawal like somebody's assisting to get the money out, or what is this for?
Yeah, so the rage quit is just the process of exiting the Stakehouse protocol. So the rage quit's important because so the Stakehouse protocol, it's very much we liken it to a it implements registry smart contract architecture. The registry smart contract architecture we describe in the position paper as the nano ledgers that operate as like they can operate as shadow ledgers of other chains. So in this case, we have an asset sitting on the consensus layer, and we have the Stakehouse protocol that has its registry that is able to periodically sync the consensus layer, and it is doing that to look, what you got to understand is the Stakehouse protocol is a permissionless protocol in terms of like there's permission, not just permissionless node running. Stakehouse protocol doesn't care for what software you run. Any software, any client, execution, consensus, boost, not boost, MEV plus, PON, whatever, it doesn't care. You can run any software, but you can also enter the protocol permissionlessly. There is no validators are not pooled together, and that is because of the power of the registry architecture. Now, it is able to track the balances and also detect because of the permissionless nature of the Stakehouse protocol. You can have malicious actors sat alongside honest actors, right? And so malicious people might join the protocol and not run the validator. They may mint their derivatives and they may never switch on the node, which is in this case of the Stakehouse protocol their loss because they will actually lose money because when you are sort of delegating your stake, you are basically saying that the Stakehouse protocol can manage small portion of your assets in the vault that is in your name, but it is able to slash some portion of your derivative tokens if and only if the things like the balance on the consensus layer is falling. And that only happens like with inactivity penalties, correlation penalties, double signing, all those sorts of things. So any kind of problems or issues on the consensus layer will reflect on the execution layer because of the balance reporting mechanism. So balance reporting is a concept so the balance reporting is something new to sort of, it might be sort of a new concept to a lot of people, but it's very much birthed inside of the Stakehouse protocol and is present in our other protocols. But it is a permissionless way of syncing the shadow ledger on the execution layer, which is the Stakehouse protocol, with what's happening on the consensus layer. And like I said, anybody can balance report. So that means anybody can report malicious behavior. Now, on your exit, going back to the original question, why rage quit? Why do we need a rage quit? Why do we need a rage quit assistant? Well, we need to know that on your exit, when you're burning your derivatives, we need to know, you need to perform a balance report. The Stakehouse protocol needs to know on your exit, did you receive any penalties? Are you offline? Are you hemorrhaging money? Because you should not be paid 32 ETH if you have leaked 2 ETH. Or your validators leak 2 ETH when you exit the protocol. So the rage quit is about doing a final sync up with the consensus layer and processing any penalties and saying, right, okay, well, you lost 2 ETH, so you cannot be paid the full amount. In order to exit, you need to perform a top up, right? It is important for the health of the houses and the protocol that the rage quit is enforced, that people don't leave the protocol and get away with malicious behavior. And the assistant is just about distributing it to all of the LPs that may have pulled together money to fund the validator in the first place. So.
Right. So if I understood correctly, what you're saying is Stakehouse protocol uses state replication. In between, validator has been, formed, registered to its exited. And that's Stakehouse protocol, right? And then it just gives you this kind of a balances in a optimistic ETH model with a DE for the save its registry and the slot, and separate. However, from a validator in Ethereum proof of stake consensus layer, every validator is a separate, bucket of a balances, right? Stake weight. Yep. And that's been added. So in Stakehouse, you have this kind of a knot that is replicate the same, but you can update its consensus layer state with the execution layer contract state and sync it. But it need to follow, since it is replicating, it need to follow the state intervals, right? As a life cycles. When it is getting added, eligibility epoch, activation epoch, then it's just going in, then there are leakages or exits, like it's get kicked, or is it a voluntary exit and all this kind of stuff. It just makes sure all this kind of state changes will actually going to get replicated on the consent on the execution layer. Right.
And Stakehouse maps its own lifecycle status from the consensus layer ones.
Right. But LSD network is an application built on top of Stakehouse protocol. LSD actually has an LP shares that has been aggregated from hundreds of thousands of users. And this is further earmarked into each validators that actually got registered and managed by the Stakehouse protocol. So the rage quit assistant basically terminates, right? The rage quit assistant will actually terminate by syncing up all the LPs and just mapping it back in execution layer and say that the validator on the consensus layer exited and it's completely finished the epochs and everything. Now we have a balance on an execution layer, rage quit, and that will prepare to its LP holders to withdraw the ETH from execution layer when it is hitting there. So those LP holders could be the one that has been deposited directly to the LSD network or deposited via another lending protocol using an LSD network, regardless how many layers of abstraction, the corresponding, the end user will get the ETH exact amount, how much it is there. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So this is a mapping and this is a facilitation of ETH coming back to execution layer should be given back to the user in an atomic fashion whenever they want to do a withdrawal. It should not be more, it should not be less.
Yeah, absolutely. If you supply 0.1 ETH to the funding of a specific validator, you should, when it exits and rage quits, you should get the principal amount back, not accounting for, all the other reward you may have received in between, right?
Right. So this is specifically to a full withdrawal. That means a validator is exiting. This is not related to the sweep. It's not related to you're burning ETH from whatever that you earned. This is the first induction balance is coming back to execution layer as a 32 ETH, right? Plus whatever it is there. But it will also clear off all the other unknown top-ups and things like that specifically to Stakehouse, but that's something a deeper subject. But this is not related to partial withdrawal. That's we need to draw a line there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so partial withdrawal is just withdrawing the liquid ETH that is paid to the Stakehouse protocol for any validator that had inflation rewards accrued to it, and then it generated a withdrawal. The cumulative amount can be partially withdrawn against sort of any validator, and that will be available soon on testnet and on the mainnet in due course. But so we are at the moment concluding an audit that had taken place with runtime verification on this subject to make sure that it's fully autonomous and it doesn't have any big problems with it. And so it's extremely highly programmable for building protocols on top of it. Especially the partial withdrawals, like I said, you can use it for repaying loans, collateral, whatever. There's many use cases for it in DeFi because you can either keep the ETH liquid or you can withdraw the ETH and do compound staking. We have a compound staking template in the Stakehouse templates. We have the compound staking should be here. In Stakehouse, we have compound staking. Yeah, so that can be used here. It's very interesting, done by a community member. So anyone that wants to build these community projects, we're happy to support them. Happy to share it with the rest of our community, and
So, right. Would the other protocols can actually track the withdrawals? Like, for example, the life cycle of the validator has been finished. Who can trigger this validator withdrawals? Do they deploy the assistant? Is it possible? Let's say I am a node runner, right? In LSD network, that's the most known format, and I want to wind down my business, or I'm just going to stop my node running, and I have received 28 ETH. In this case, I'm not a 0 ETH member, but I'm just a 4 ETH member. So I have some money to withdraw. That's what I'm saying. So I'm exiting. So I did the voluntary exit. The money has been gone. Is it the execution layer is where the ETH is coming? So I want to withdraw my ETH, right? I stopped it. Who can initiate this rage quit? Because in order for the withdrawal to perform, you really need to terminate the state from the stakehouse and select that has been finished, end of story. And nothing you can do after this rage quit fully finished. That's the last balance, right? Reconciling. So who can initiate? Is that me as a validator node runner can just go and trigger this? Do I need to have anything else in execution layer, like a signing key or kind of stuff, or somebody else? Even if I have exited, my save the DETH holders can do that. I just want to understand who can trigger this process.
So anyone who has a signing key can trigger the voluntary exit of the validator on the consensus layer. So the node operator is completely fine to do that. Once the voluntary exit has been triggered, all the other steps can be facilitated by anyone inside of the LSD. So anyone is free to deploy the rage quit assistant, because the rage quit assistant. So what it is, if that node runner or node operator has if they're part of the 4 ETH club, so that means that they have supplied 4 ETH to run the validator. They have the right of the collateralized slot, but the rest of the 28 ETH was funded by some other LPs. So in order to rage quit, like you said, you need to terminate all the states in the stakehouse. So you need to burn all the induction derivatives minted by the protocol. So that means like the DETH and the SETH that is being syndicated for fees and MEV, but that those tokens are no longer earning fees and MEV because the validator has exited. So it is not performing any block production. So it cannot earn any further. Cannot earn on the SAV side. The protected stakers cannot earn any more inflation rewards. On the fees and MEV side, they cannot earn any more MEV because, like I said, the validators exited from the consensus layer. So anyone can, once the voluntary exit has been broadcast, anyone can coordinate together to deploy this assistant. And what it does is it says to it says like, oh hey, this validator is in the process of exiting. Anyone who wants to bring their DETH and their SETH for the for conversion back into ETH, bring it here, and you'll get a share of that ETH. So it is you don't have any slippage. Obviously, you're just basically you're unwrapping your DETH and your SETH for ETH, then once those derivatives have been replaced inside of the rage quit assistant, then anybody again can perform the rage quit. Once the full withdrawal is executed, then anyone with their LP tokens can come and claim their share from the Rage Quit Assistant, from the funds that arrive in that assistant contract. So like if it's 32.5 ETH, then, assuming no penalties have been applied to that validator, the node operator is going to get their 4 ETH principal back, plus any unknown top-ups. The protected stakers, they're going to get their share of the 24 ETH supplied to the LSD pool, plus inflation rewards and some top-ups, and the SETH will get their principal back. And obviously, like I said, they will have maybe potentially some of the fees and MEV guys, the node operator and the fees and MEV free floating slot will have claimed various MEV. We've had already on mainnet with LSD, we've had validators getting 4 ETH blocks and people getting nice slice of that, and one validator getting 3 blocks in 17 days. So that is separate to the principal and the induction ETH supply that gets redistributed when a full withdrawal takes place. So more information on how that model works and the split can be found in the docs for LSD. We have the mechanism workflow, yeah. So that, this talks about how you have the 3 pool staking, you have the protected stakers, fees and MEV, and the node operators that are supplying the various ETH and fund distribution taking place. And so this, the Rage Quit is the reverse of that, giving back the ETH that was locked in the consensus layer until the validator exited. So yeah, maybe that helps answer your question.
Yeah, so this will actually make the multi-party Rage Quit order of magnitude, better. You don't really need to coordinate the signing process. You basically switch that into an LP and they can redeem it whenever they want.
Yeah, that's right. And that goes for people that are the reporters that work for the protocol. So anyone can balance report. You can report fresh inflation rewards. So you can say, hey, there's I'd like to mint new DETH because the Stakehouse protocol has received withdrawals. So every, the withdrawals here, there will be largely inflation rewards. So you can report that to the Stakehouse protocol and say, hey, you received some money. That inflation rewards can be minted as a DETH. Or if the validator is offline and it's leaking, its balance goes down to 31.8, and you can flash that validator. So that will flash some collateralized slots. And anyone can top that up and claim a portion of the fees and MEV earned by the syndicate of an LSD network. It is, worthwhile running a reporter and keeping the execution layer in sync with the consensus layer, because it has benefits from the liquid D side, but also from the fees and MEV side. You can, if there is a validator leaking and not doing its job, it will lose the earnings, the MEV earnings that it's accrued.
Okay, cool. Thanks. All right. Love to know the partial withdrawal part.
Pardon?
Love to know the partial withdrawal part.
Yeah, so you can, you've got 2 options. You can report these sweeps. So, that they're small payloads, you can report them, and, you can say, you can report in one transaction, you can report like all of this list of withdrawals. Maybe let's say that amounts to like 0.1 ETH or 0.2 ETH. You can report that and you can claim you can claim DETH from that. So this is funds that are in the protocol, and at any time you can burn that DETH in order to redeem the ETH. So related to the inflation rewards.
So if I have a DETH in my hand and just like I can go, this kind of 2 indexes, right? Open index and curated indexes. Like if I have in open index, if you open the monitoring, you'll see that a bunch of validators already in the open index, right? And just go there. You want ETH for your DETH. slippage free, whatever it is, like just ETH, you can go and see that all those validators in the open index, and then you can curate, and then it will show somehow, it will show, let's say there's a UI or something, and then boom, you click a couple of buttons and you get the ETH, if there is enough ETH.
Yeah, well, the open index on mainnet is yielding 5.3% APR. In the last 7 days, it's earned 0.17 ETH. So anyone can report that to the protocol, and so you can do two things. You can either report it and just get a DETH, or you can report and withdraw in one transaction. So you can instantly redeem the DETH and get your ETH back. So here you can see individual validators, what houses they're from, how they're performing. This one is actually performing nicely.
I think open index, can you mint the ETH from open index?
Yes. Yes, you need to have some share of the, in order to get the ETH, you need to have a save ETH share in the open index. So
well, you need to curate that save ETH share then in that case.
Yeah. Otherwise you give your DETH away to other people.
Yeah. So it's basically like you can either redeem it, or if you just see some of the validator has some, oh, it's accruing a lot, just curate and mint the DETH and just drop it back to open index, and then you get the DETH. So you can just withdraw back, right? If you have enough DETH, go and curate that save ETH, mint the DETH, withdraw the DETH back, so it will go back to open index.
Yeah. So if I can show in the simplest form. So we have these templates from the Academy. So what you're talking about is there's different ways of managing your assets in the Save ETH registry. So the Save ETH registry is how you manage your DETH assets. So you can like stake your DETH there, and that's where you can accrue the yield. The open index is the default index, and it's like a pro rata distribution of the yield, but you can also isolate your DETH from the open index. So basically it is in your own name, in your own index, and all the rewards accrued to specific validators. So you attach your DETH to specific validators, and all the rewards get accrued to you only, rather than like distributing it to everybody, right? You have this like arbitrage template. You can basically, this is what you're talking about like managing the open index, the DETH in the open index. You can isolate your DETH separate, attach it to validators. You will accrue the yield, and you can then but
you can do this in one transaction, right? So I'm going and I see some of the open index validators nice and juicy, and it has an earned ETH. I want mint DETH for that because I like DETH, and I have a bunch of DETH with me. I just go and curate that immediately and mint the DETH and withdraw the DETH. When you withdraw the DETH, what happens? The save ETH goes back to open index, so it will just get back. You can do this kind of skim.
Yeah, absolutely. You can modify this contract to do that. That's not a problem.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Yeah, definitely. But the monitoring is useful for tracking performance, predicting sweeps, and figuring out, you can do this programmatically, figuring out when to run your report, curate the assets, etc.
Sure.
You can see which houses are performing the best. Those things.
Mm-hmm.
But Manol, maybe you can sort of maybe you can talk more about sort of things happening in the SDK, or how they might, like, how did they get their teeth stuck into this, maybe on Gurley? Because obviously you want to test first on Gurley before.
Yeah. Okay. So we have already tested all of this voluntary withdrawal as well as full withdrawal, and that was done via the SDK. So that's what we'll be talking about right now. So this was the validator B298 that we exited. Basically, you can see the last sweep. So each of these withdrawals, we call them a sweep, and the final sweep was of 32 ethers, and all of this was sent to the account manager of Stakehouse protocol. So account manager is set as the recipient address for all the validators that are associated with the Stakehouse protocol or the LSD protocol. So that's the receiving end of the ETH after it is withdrawn from the beacon chain. So yeah, here's the script that we worked on while during all of this process. So initially, the very first step is actually announcing to the beacon chain that a validator, or if I'm the node runner, then I'll announce to the beacon chain that I want to exit as a validator and would not like to propose or attest any more blocks. So this broadcast voluntary withdrawal does exactly that. This After this voluntary withdrawal, it basically takes some time for the beacon chain to process it, and that actually takes at least a day. And once that is done, uh, in the UI, basically, we next hop onto the deploying the rage quit assistant. But if you're working with the SDK, this time limit won't affect you as much. And so this waiting period for this waiting period, you can deploy the rage quit assistant, you can rage quit and all, but you won't be able to do the final withdrawal. So for that, you'll have to wait for the withdrawal epoch to be reached and all the ETH to be collected to the account manager. So let's say that you have already broadcasted your voluntary withdrawal, and now you are ready to exit. So since the validator is a part of LSD, that means they'll have to deploy a rage quit assistant where all the ETH will be collected from the account manager and then redistributed to the shareholders, the LP holders of that BLS public key. So in this case, we are just deploying a rage quit assistant and getting the address. For this particular BLS key, here's our rage quit assistant address that we use on Curly. And next comes the borrowing DE part. So since the rage quit assistant is deployed, it needs to be supplied with the DE, and LSD has protected staking pool, which handles all these deeds. So there are two ways to actually deposit deeds into the rage quit assistant. One of them being you directly call one of the functions and deposit it, or the other is you actually borrow it from the protected staking pool. So in this case, we actually did both, and I'll just tell you why. So the first thing that we did was borrow deeds from the protected staking pool. And once we borrowed, we actually checked if the rage quit assistant had the 24 ETH or not. And we found out that actually, no, it didn't have it. So we had to provide some value, that is some TETH from our own wallet in this case. So this actually combines the two conditions together. And in order to do rage quit, 24 DETH will be required. So 23.999 something came from the protected staking pool, and the rest was deposited via the wallet. So once this 24 DETH was there in the rage quit assistant, the next step comes checking if the BLS public key was slashed in the Stakehouse protocol or not. So for this reason, we calculate the exit fees. So exit fees is basically the top-up amount that is needed for a validator to successfully exit the Stakehouse protocol. So in this case, the exit fees actually came out to be zero because the validator was performing well and ideal. And the next step comes is actually rage quitting. So once the validator rage quits, as Vincent earlier mentioned, these tokens are burned and then ETH is deposited there. So in case of rage quit assistant, the ETH is sitting in the account manager. Now we need to call it to the rage quit assistant so that it can be distributed. So we will go on to report all these sweeps, withdrawals to the contracts and let them know how much ETH needs to be associated with this particular BLS public key. So for this reason, we initially fetched a beacon chain report because that will tell us the exact state of the BLS public key. And once we have it, we will know the validator index, we will know the total ETH that was actually sent to the BLS public key, and then get the sweeps report. So these sweeps report via balance reporting, a user can do 10 at a time or even more via the SDK. So this balance reporting is more like a periodic process that anyone can do. But in this case, for our convenience, we just took the first and the last epoch for which the validator was active and then collected all the sweeps report and then reported it to the deposit router. So basically, we calculate the sum of total sweeps from there, and then we generate a final sweep. So this is how a final sweep looks like. So final sweep is the last sweep in which about this 30 to 320 million going. So that's basically 32 each value is transferred, and you can see the recipient being the account manager 0x9522. And this was the final sweep in which after which there won't be any more sweeps because the validator has already accepted, and this is the last value to claim. That's it. And once we have the final sweep generated, we actually verify it and generate the final report. We format it according to our needs, and then the verified final report actually looks like this. So this is generated via the deposit router, which basically consists of the finalized report which was provided by the beacon chain, then the final sweep report which was generated, and then the signature. So this report is actually active only for next 20 minutes or so. So until that time, this report needs to be supplied to the rage quit assistant, which will then execute the full withdrawal. So the last part actually is executing full withdrawal, and we will then be able to call all the ETH from account manager into the rage quit assistant, and then claim all those ETH from the rage quit assistant. So in this case, for this validator, we did a full withdrawal, and you can see the 32.15 ethers being transferred from the account manager, that is the 0x952 address, to the 0xAB. So this AB628 is the address of the rage quit assistant. If you can see here, it starts from AB and with 0B, and that's exactly this address, which means our full withdrawal was successful and 32.15 something ETH have been transferred. So right after those ETH have been transferred to the rage quit assistant, now it all comes to claiming those ETH back. So this BE0D address is that of the protected staking pool. Since I mentioned earlier that in this case of BLS public key, we had borrowed some ETH from the protected staking pool, and then here we had borrowed some ETH from the protected staking pool and then deposited some of our own. So this here we deposited some of our own ETH. So that's the reason you can see 23.999 something 81. This was from the protected staking pool. Hence, those many RDETH. RDETH is basically the LP token issued by the rage quit assistant LP token, and it was transferred back to the protected staking pool so that it can be claimed. And the rest was transferred to my address because I basically deposited that much amount. So this here is the address of the rage quit assistant. Since I was running the node, I was able to claim back my 4 ETH, and you can still see there's 28.13 ETH still sitting there for the protected staking pool and the fees and more pool users to claim it back. And hence, it's just sitting there in the rage quit assistant until the LP holders come and claim it. So that's how a process of rage quit and withdrawals look like with the perspective of the SDK.
So will we? So there will be a UI, right, that will help to make this process more simplified for non-signal users, right?
Right. It's under development currently, and then yeah, it will definitely be there to make it a lot more smoother.
So we have, yes. So it's not far. It will help the users, guide them through the process. You know, there are a few steps, but it is their sort of users interacting with the contract, smart contract only, requesting their ETH anytime, any day, as long as Ethereum is online and accepting transactions. So we will be releasing some docs as well, guides and Storyl SDK UI guide, to actually make this as straightforward as possible. But looking forward to sort of the things that people are going to build on top of this. And sort of like early feedback. We want this to be stress tested on Gorelli, and once we get enough confidence, we will move to the mainnet.
So. So with SDK will extend the support to all kind of external adapters to get this processed in a much more easier path. Or is this SDK is just for, internal things? Just want to understand like how people can leverage SDKs.
Yeah, SDK is open to use for anyone. Basically, if you are a user of LSD protocol, Stakehouse protocol, or even trying it out, you can just use SDK for everything. It's just that we expose things so that not only the user but our UI can use it as well. So sometimes there can be cases where the UI is limited, but if you want to have the full access, you can obviously use the SDK. In case of
Will there be any dedicated use cases, tutorials, things like that we are going to add into documentations so that people can actually read and so that, not everything is, as you said, it's in the UI, but, when the protocols want to integrate.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be releasing more tutorials and docs on our docs.joinstakehouse.com. So all the scripts that we just discussed and tutorials will be available there. And moreover, what I can think of here is if in case, let's say a user is using the UI and he's skeptical of uploading their key store while doing the voluntary exit, they can definitely use the SDK and not go via the UI because they just want to make it more secure. So they can directly use the SDK, host their local instance, and then do all of these withdrawals directly to their ledger or whatever address it is.
Is there anything else anyone want to ask? Tarva, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, cool. So I think this is a wrap. We will see you in the mainnet. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.